Be careful of what you've been made to believe, especially given that all information that we receive comes from our corrupt, narcissistic, racist oppressors. They want us believing that we suffered irreparable damage by slavery, but that false narrative is actually a psychological warfare tactic created and spread into our communities by white propagandists. It aids the white society in maintaining their long-term oppression of us. Here's how it actually works. Within the U.S. Department of Defense military doctrine on psychological warfare, it states that an effective way to psychologically harm, subdue, and control a large targeted population without having to physically fight them is by manipulating them to believe that there's something inherently wrong with themselves. When people have been made to believe that there's something inherently, internally wrong with them, this psychology deflates their collective self-esteem. It demoralizes them. It also turns their collective aggressions away from their oppressors and redirects it against themselves. It also erodes the morale of the targeted population. It can even prevent their will to stand up against their oppressors. It also makes them more compliant with their oppressors' dominance over their lives. In fact, the programming is so effective that many will even prefer their oppressors' dominance over their lives. No group can be made to believe that there's something they've been irreparably damaged and not be negatively affected by accepting that belief. This is what believing that slavery irreparably damaged us does to Black people. When Black people accept the narrative, that narrative is very harmful to our collective psyche. The reason why many Black people have so easily accepted the narrative that slavery has irreparably damaged us is because the white society constantly inundates us with fraudulent negative propaganda about ourselves. Under such circumstances, it should not come as a surprise that many Black people have brought into the narrative that slavery has irreparably damaged us. It is harmful to our psyche. They want us believing that we suffered irreparable damage by slavery because believing it is harmful to our psyche. And that false belief makes us much more easy to control and much easier to be subjugated. But however, it's proven totally untrue by the many amazing things we did during and following slavery. Our achievements following slavery were extraordinary. After slavery was abolished in the U.S. in 1865, and in spite of receiving no reparation and being constantly plagued by the evils of white racism, African Americans built our own cities across the nation, and in many times those cities exceeded the white neighbors. And we also built our own school. And within many regions across the United States, Black illiteracy had become lesser than white illiteracy. Those Black cities were subsequently destroyed and those Black schools dismantled by the white society. Furthermore, between the year of 1870 through 1940, African Americans submitted 726 invention patent applications to the U.S. Patent Office. This more than doubled those submitted by Caucasians during the same time frame, and in spite of the fact that African Americans then only made up 3% of the U.S. population. That's extraordinary. Furthermore, the hidden fact is that in spite of the traumas of slavery, most inventions that have revolutionized the world were either invented by Black people or were directly inspired by earlier inventions made by Black people. It's a fact that is being withheld from the public through the white society's monopoly over information. They conceal this fact by feeding lies to the public that gives their racial group credit for most inventions that were actually made by Black people. Case, point, and proof. Did you know that before the Wright brothers flew their aircraft in 1909, that a Black man named Charles F. Page had already invented, flown, and patented an aircraft 3 years earlier in 1906? The white society also miseducates us to believe that Thomas Edison is responsible for lighting up the world. The hidden fact is that after Edison patented his light bulb, no companies purchased it nor mass produced it. This is because it was deemed not efficient enough. It lit very dimly and only lasted a few minutes. The inventors whose light bulb was purchased, mass produced, and spread around the world was actually invented by an African American named Lewis Latimer. He sold the patent to the U.S. Electric Company in 1881. He was also dispatched around the world to oversee its installation. Therefore, in reality, it was actually a black man that lit up the entire world. The white society also miseducates us to believe that Henry Ford invented the first automobile. It was actually an African American inventor and carriage company entrepreneur named Charles R. Patterson that built the first automobile. The C.R. Patterson and Sons Company started out as a carriage building firm in 1873. In the early 1900s, Patterson and his sons converted the company from a carriage business to an automobile manufacturer. C.R. Patterson began making automobiles before Henry Ford, and his automobiles were considered much more sophisticated. It was released in the early 1900s and it sold for $850. It had a 4-cylinder Continental engine. C.R. Patterson and his sons were forced out of business by Henry Ford in 1939. It's by deliberate design that most people are unaware of these historical facts. These noted facts and many more achievements made by black people throughout history have been expunged from the public record and history. The past existence of black people has been deliberately marginalized by the narcissistic, racist white society. The hidden fact is that the achievements made by black people following slavery were in fact extraordinary. For in spite of cultural traumas wrought by the injustice of white racism and slavery, most inventions that have revolutionized the world, as I said before, were in fact either invented by black people or were directly inspired by earlier inventions by black people. Your perception of reality is a white deception. Without black people, there would exist no automobiles, no airplanes, no working light bulbs, no elevators, therefore no skyscrapers, no internet, no emails, no cell phones, no GPS, no accurate weather forecasting systems, no refrigerator, therefore also no refrigerator trucks, and therefore no ice cream trucks, no blood banks, no dry cleaning, no lawnmowers, no home surveillance security system, no home game cartridge, no doorknobs, no 3D movies. We wouldn't have cell phones or cameras on our cell phones. Black people have in fact enriched nearly every aspect of the lives of every person on this planet through our many inventions. It's actually the ingenious minds of black people that moves our society forward. I do realize that to many people, I might sound like a raving lunatic. I understand. For whenever lies have been told to the masses over generational lines, the truth will sound absolutely ridiculous and the speaker will sound like a raving lunatic. Nonetheless, those who know the truth must teach. African proverb. The white society sits upon a throne of white exalting and black marginalizing lies. By distorting all facts, a greater people can be manipulated to perceive themselves as being the lesser people, thus making them more humble and more compliant with the lesser group's dominance over their lives. And it doesn't matter if the information is untrue. All that matters is that those greater people believe that the information is true. Most of these people will act accordingly to the information because they've all been given the same lies. This is precisely what the white society has done, more particularly what social scientists, white historians, and white propagandists have done to black people. This is all possible because regardless of how intelligent people are, If it's possible to control the information that people receive, it's entirely possible to control what they'll believe and how they believe and how they think, because our belief shapes our thoughts and our thoughts affect our behavior. Therefore, those who controls our belief shapes our thoughts and behavior. White oppressive forces have exploited their monopoly over information that we receive to manipulate us to think lesser of ourselves and to think more of them. White social science describes this as instilling a value system into the minds of black people that makes us more compliant with white dominance over our lives. But more importantly, these noted facts prove that we are resilient people and that slavery did not irreparably damage us. Misleading us to believe that slavery has irreparably damaged us is a black racially demoralizing psychological warfare tactic that gives the oppressors greater power and greater control over the black population. They keep us believing the fraudulent worse and fraudulent lesser about ourselves because it aids them maintaining their dominance over our lives. It makes us easier to be subjugated. More specifically, when black people are misled to believe the fraudulent worse and lesser about ourselves, we become demoralized, divided. Many of us become self-loathing. This divides our ranks. This also shifts black collective aggressions away from the white oppressive society and redirects it against ourselves. And we start blaming ourselves for everything. A demoralized black population is much more easier to subjugate than one that is not demoralized. Furthermore, the unrelenting demoralization attacks the core foundation of what bonds us as a people, and we can then be ruled over forever. This is our true reality. It is time to wake up to our reality. One love and peace.